this event. We're really grateful to Benchmark, our catalytic sponsor for the evening, and to Shack 15, our venue and collaborating sponsor on this event. We're really thrilled for their support. We couldn't have done it without them, and just thrilled to be in this very cool, exciting space with beautiful view of the bridge on this glorious autumn night. So those of you in the room already know this, but for those on the live stream, my name is Sheila Hassel-Hughes, and I am the CEO of Human Energy, the host and organizing body for this evening's Salon. Human Energy has changed my life. I owe much of that to our late founder, Ben Kassira, who sucked me in when I was uncertain, a little leery, and quite a newbie to all this deep stuff about collective mind, the evolution of global intelligence, and collective consciousness. As I got more involved with Human Energy, I came to understand that this is my life's mission. 21 years ago, I had a vision. I won't tell you about the vision. If you want to chat to me afterwards, I'll share my vision. But I had gone into this retreat looking for a personal mission statement for my life. My goal was so that I could use it to say no to things, because that's what mission statements are for, right? And the mission I came away with was to see, speak, and stitch connections. Didn't work very well for saying no to things, but it helped me know when something really resonated. And this work with Human Energy, this is what I am doing, this is what we are doing every day. This is what we're doing here tonight. I've also been really grateful and enlightened and inspired by finding a truly integrative worldview, a way of thinking about the world, about history, about the future, about our origins and our destiny as humans that is deeply rooted in the facts of science, and yet carries a sense of larger purpose and meaning and hope and optimism that is enough to get me out of bed every day, and that inspires me with a true sense of purpose and transcendence, something as humans I think we all need. Every day I am energized by my work, and I saw somewhere here Erica Golden is in the room. Erica was my professional coach, there you are, when I was transitioning out of my former role as an academic dean, which was rich and fulfilling work in many ways. But I always remember she said to me, you know, Sheila, work takes energy. And if your work is not energizing you, you're going to burn out really fast. I'm delighted to work for an organization that is all about human energy and that energizes me every day. Thank you for the energy you've brought in the room tonight. At Human Energy, our vision is a future where humanity consciously evolves toward our full collective potential in harmony with technology and the planet. No small vision, no small thing to achieve. And our mission is to serve as a catalytic hub for evolving collective consciousness. I hope you are feeling something of being part of a hub or in a hub tonight. I want to say a few words about our conceptual framework at Human Energy, because this will help contextualize the conversation we're having. I know that Terry will speak more to some of the scientific elements of this. I'm not a scientist. I was an English professor for many years, so that will tell you something. Maybe not the right thing, but something. So one of our central concept, the foundation of our work at Human Energy, is this idea called the noosphere, or the noosphere, depending on who you talk to. We accept either variation. It's a term that was first coined a little over 100 years ago, 1923, depending on who you talk to. A French Jesuit scientist, a paleontologist, geologist, and philosopher theologian, very multidisciplinary kind of guy, named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, first theorized the noosphere, along with another guy named Vladimir Vernadsky, who was a Russian geochemist. We understand the noosphere to be the third layer of our planet. If we think about the geosphere as that which supports the biosphere, and we live in the biosphere, the third layer is the noosphere, from the Greek nuos for mind, and sphere. It is the space in which knowledge, collective wisdom, and shared consciousness has been evolving ever since thought first left one mind and entered the space between people. That is the birth of the noosphere. Terry theorizes that in thinking about symbolic language and the relationship between language and mind in evolution. Today, the noosphere truly encompasses the planet as humans encompass the planet. And it's evolving at an exponential pace, thanks to the internet and more recently, AI. We are shaping as a species our own evolution and that of the planet, and we're being shaped by it through the global sphere, the expanding noosphere. A second core concept for human energy is what we call the technosocial dilemma, which is the reality that technology is evolving at an exponential pace. If I look at that hockey stick graph one more time, I don't know what I'm going to do. It gives me anxiety. And anxiety is part of the technosocial dilemma, right? Technology is evolving faster than our psyches, than our social institutions, than our political structures are prepared to reconcile, to manage. It creates anxiety, disconnection, a loss of orientation, a sense of loss of agency. I see this in my students. I still teach a little bit at St. Mary's College, and I have a former student, and we have some alumni here in the room as well, and another student joining us. But I definitely have seen this in my students. The sense that AI, in particular, is maybe an alien threatening force that we want to just avoid, that we have no control over, right? We're either addicted to it or we're running from it or both. And the sense of this is a generation whose lives have been radically shaped and harmed by social media, a first revolution that we didn't get right. So at Human Energy, we're very concerned about addressing the relationship between humans and our tools, our technology, in order to realize that vision of a future where we evolve in harmony with technology and the planet, right? In response to the technosocial dilemma, and in light of what we know about the noosphere, at Human Energy, we offer what we call a third story. It's a way between those first origin creation stories that for millennia gave a sense of meaning and purpose and orientation to peoples around the world. Stories that told us who we were, where we came from, and where we were going. But stories that were hard to reconcile very often with the science of evolution in particular. What do we do with those first stories? How do we continue to find meaning in them if we understand evolution to be a story of random chance in which we're just bumping along and happened to land here and will happen to disappear? We offer a third story that blends or weaves together the sense of purpose and meaning and human particularity of those first stories with the factual basis, the scientific rigor of the science of evolution that says actually evolution is always in the direction of greater complexity, and complexity, when folded in upon itself, gives rise to mind. And we are evolving today at the level of consciousness and at the level of increasingly complex collective consciousness. And it's ours to shape, and it's ours to participate in. And we are not victims, but neither do we quite control it. So this is our dilemma. How do we maneuver our way? How do we steer our way through and with AI in particular to a future of flourishing? So at Human Energy, we do three kinds of things. We do research, scientific research, primarily sort of secondary scientific research. We develop educational programs, projects, modules, curriculum. And we engage in dissemination of this third story of the research that we conduct about the noosphere. And we do that dissemination through media. We have an incredibly robust and wonderful YouTube channel. Kudos to Devin and Abe, who are here tonight running the technical production for our event, for building that amazing YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about Human Energy, visit us on YouTube. And events. We've hosted 2 international conferences, one in Berkeley, one in Morocco. And this is the second in our new Global Salon series. We hosted our first salon in New York in June. It was a little trial balloon. It was very successful. But this is our home turf. And we feel the stakes are high tonight. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your smiling faces. We're excited about what's going to happen. I will say just 2 other very brief things. One is that we're an evolving organization. We spun off as our own independent nonprofit from the Kasira Family Foundation in 2021, so we're pretty new. And as we look at our own evolutionary transition as an organization, one of the ways we see that happening is in partnership with other organizations, nonprofit organizations, startups, corporations, educational institutions that are doing more applied work. We bring this conceptual framework, we bring this big, inspiring story and integrative worldview, and we can help lend coherence and meaning and inspiration to those applied projects. So if that sounds like something that might resonate with the work that you do, I hope you'll talk with me or one of our team members after our discussion tonight, or reach out and connect online. I want to highlight very briefly 2 current projects, both of which are in development, that we hope will reach a broad audience and that I want you to know about. The first is we've done a lot around education. David Sloan Wilson, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, offered an amazing online masterclass in 2023. We've got educational projects happening in universities around the country and in other places, and in K-12, teacher education now. And we're about to launch our first online course. So Devin has been working hard with a couple of our partners, and we'll be offering a course on the technosocial dilemma online early in the new year, so look for that. The second is we are in the development phase for a full-length documentary film on the theme of tonight's salon. Yes, just so happens. Alignment for a major evolutionary transition, or what is the new title, Alan? Evolving alignment, I think, something like that. And so I want to invite Alan to identify himself. Alan, where are you? There you are. This is our filmmaker, Alan Honeck. Alan's come in from the Pacific Northwest to be with us tonight. If you're interested in what we're doing with this film, or interested to play a part in helping to support it, or just learning more about it, I encourage you to talk to Alan, or of course to me afterwards. We're going to share with you just now a very brief little preview, give you a glimpse of what the film is about. One of the greatest challenges of our time is ensuring that artificial intelligence aligns with human values and goals. But whose values? Whose goals? When humanity itself is so conflicted. The need for alignment isn't new. Across 4 billion years, life has increased its complexity through major evolutionary transitions, consisting of new ways to align individual interests in support of an emerging collective whole. Each major transition included new ways to use information to suppress conflict and maintain alignment between its parts. We are now in the midst of another major transition. Our challenge is greater than ensuring that AI aligns with human values. We also need new ways to align with one another and cooperate at planetary scale. What role will AI play in a major evolutionary transition today? I'm really excited about where this project is going. Before I introduce David, I just want to say a few more words about why Human Energy is hosting this salon. It's because we think we bring a crucial new lens to one of the greatest challenges of our time, the noosphere, that living field of humanity's shared evolution. Every major evolutionary transition has involved new ways of sharing information and cooperating at greater scales, from single cells to multicellular life, to early humans developing symbolic culture and societies. We think the noosphere is the latest of these transitions, that we're on the threshold, or maybe we're already in the midst of this new transition. Our role is to help make sense of this moment together by integrating expertise from science, philosophy, and practice, and to help guide this transformation towards coherence and shared purpose. Tonight we ask, what can we learn from the science of major evolutionary transitions to inform how we approach this challenge? Our mission at Human Energy is to help that emergence unfold, to be a catalytic hub for evolving collective intelligence, cooperation, and shared purpose on a planetary scale. Tonight, we think that hub is coming alive here, and we're in it together, full of possibility. I want to introduce my friend and our partner, David Sloan Wilson from Pro-Social World. David is a renowned evolutionary biologist and author. He's best known, probably, for pioneering the theory of multi-level selection, how cooperation and altruism evolve within and between groups, both. Several of his books are among those on display on our info table. David is a founding advisory board member for our organization, Human Energy. And he's also a partner as president of Pro-Social World with us, and we collaborate on a number of things. He's played an especially important role in both of our first two salons, and I'm really grateful for that. So I have invited David, who knows a number of our speakers very well and has been getting to know another, to introduce our panelists.
Okay, everyone. So today we have a fusion of cutting-edge evolutionary science and cutting-edge technology applications in our four panelists and in the audience. And I think that if we look at the qualifications of the audience, it's about as awesome as the panelists. And so this is not like teachers and learners. This is basically just a great talent pool here that we hope to integrate. So I'm going to introduce each person in turn and ask them to come up and find a seat. Terry Deacon is a renowned neuroanthropologist and professor emeritus of anthropology at the University of California, Berkeley. As a leading voice on the evolution of mind, his work explores how meaning, language, and consciousness emerge from living systems. His acclaimed books, The Symbolic Species, The Coevolution of Language and the Brain, and Incomplete Nature, How Mind Emerged from Matter, bridge evolutionary biology, cognitive science, and complex systems to illuminate the origins of thought and life itself. As a founding member of Human Energy's Advisory Board, Terry contributes to Human Energy's inquiry into emergence in the noosphere, helping shape how we understand the evolution of mind in an age of intelligent machines. So welcome, Terry. Welcome. Next, we have Nichol Bradford, is a pioneer in human potential in AI, dedicated to advancing technologies that enhance well-being and human flourishing. She leads Human+Tech Week as the chief curator and co-founded Transformative Tech, the world's largest ecosystem of funders, founders, and investors building tech for human thriving. With experience spanning Disney Interactive and the Neuremia Collective Venture Fund, Nichol bridges behavioral science, leadership, and innovation to ensure technology amplifies humanity's highest capacities. Her work charts pathways for humanity and AI to co-evolve towards greater wisdom and collective resilience. So thank you very much, Nichol. Next, we have Peter Fenton, is a leading venture capitalist shaping the future of technology with vision and long-term impact. As a general partner at Benchmark Capital, he has spent over 2 decades supporting transformative companies, including Twitter, Yelp, and New Relic. Fenton brings a rare combination of strategic insight and humanistic perspective, emphasizing innovation and technology ecosystems that ally with enduring human values. He has a long-standing interest in evolutionary theory and philosophy in general, and joins the Salon with curiosity about technology's cultural and ethical dimensions and how leadership plays a role in guiding AI towards shared progress. We have Athena Octopus, is executive director of the Cooperative Futures Institute, a new initiative applying cooperation science to humanity's most pressing challenges, including human-AI interaction. She's also the current president of the International Society for Evolution, Ecology, and Cancer. As a cooperation theorist and biologist, she explores how cooperative dynamics shape systems across scales, from the cellular level where cancer emerges to human societies. Octopus also directs the Interdisciplinary Cooperation Initiative and is a professor of psychology at Arizona State University, as well as author of The Cheating Cell, How Evolution Helps Us Understand and Treat Cancer, and A Field Guide to the Apocalypse. Her work reveals how understanding cooperation across domains can guide humanity towards a more aligned, sustainable, and expansion technological future. And so with that, let the feast begin.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, David. On with the panel then. So I want to say just a couple of brief words, and I promise I'm not going to talk nearly so much from now on. But I want to open with sort of a broad framing set of questions that we hope to explore. And we've had a couple of Zooms before this event to get the juices flowing between our panelists. So I'm excited about what should be a primed and rich conversation. So I would frame this as the question of what does alignment mean? Surely it's not just aligning AI with humans, who are clearly pretty misaligned with each other in many ways. But AI also seems to present an urgent challenge and an opportunity, perhaps, to align ourselves, to come to a greater shared identity and purpose as humans together, and enter into a major evolutionary transition for humanity with AI as catalyst and tool. So what could species-level alignment look like? What's the goal, hope here? What are our greatest resources and obstacles for achieving that? Can AI actually play a role in helping us with that? And what are the scientific, social, and technical constraints and opportunities here for humans evolving in harmony with AI and the planet? So those are the kind of broad parameters for this evening's discussion. I'm sure we will answer them all very thoroughly in the next 45 minutes or so. But I want to begin with a more specific question to our panelists. Invite you to begin by sharing a little bit, like 2 or 3 minutes each, about where you're coming from and what you're seeing in your work that makes these kinds of questions compelling, promising, or feel urgent for you? Why are you particularly drawn to this conversation tonight? And what questions, strategies, or tools are you bringing with you? So where are you coming from? What are you seeing? And what are you bringing with you? And maybe we could start with Terry, as I expect you'll lay more helpful groundwork around the science of major evolutionary transitions in the noosphere that might help ground the conversation going forward.
All right, now the next question is, do I take the microphone?
No, you need to turn on your...
So that's the question is, oh, I am on. I'm on.
Yep, you're on.
All right. I'm on. So my background that gets me into this goes back, unfortunately, a long ways. But it has to do with studying the evolution of language. I years ago spent time in courses with a man named Noam Chomsky, who many of you know. He and I could never agree. I argued that his whole theory about language was biologically implausible. And I set out as a young graduate student to find out biologically why we're different than other species. And of course, where to look? You look in the brain. So I spent my early career, studying what's different about human brains and other brains. Luckily, there were lots of new technologies at the time. This is in the 1980s and 90s. And I was surprised, first of all, of how similar our brains are to other brains, how unlikely it is that we can find an obviously smoking gun in this process. But the other thing that was critical is to recognize how different language was. We take it for granted. What I realized is, and this leads me back to the noosphere story, is that the noosphere, the distribution of thought around the world, begins with language. No other species can meet each other for the first time and get into each other's minds, to know about their past. Every one of us, when we meet someone for the first time, that's what we want to know. We live in the noosphere. We've been living in the noosphere since language began. So when I ran into Ben Kassira for the first time, he was very interested in that. He felt that the noosphere was sort of in the future, and I was arguing, no, the noosphere has always been with us. It's accelerating. And as a result, I was drawn to this story deeply and have stayed with it. The issue is that we can learn from the biology, from the neuroscience, from the evolutionary biology, from language, and from computation, and to know the differences and the similarities and how they fit together. And I'm hopeful that the science of the noosphere will grow because of that.
Awesome, great. Well, I'm Athena Actipis. I'm a professor at Arizona State University where I study cooperation across systems. So I've kind of made my career on looking for general principles that underlie cooperation, whether we're talking about the way that cells in our bodies cooperate to make us functional. If you stop to think about it, it's absolutely astounding that our bodies are made of about 30 trillion cells that are cooperating and coordinating every millisecond to make us function, to make us be able to sit here and have a conversation together. It's completely mind-boggling. But really, that's based on cooperation, on coordination, and an extremely high amount of information being transferred all of the time among the cells in our body. I've also looked at cooperation in human societies. So I have a more than decade-long project called the Human Generosity Project, where we've done field work in more than a dozen societies around the world, looking at how people help each other in times of need. We've also done experiments with human participants. We've done online studies. We've done computational modeling, looking at how these strategies for helping each other in times of need evolve, and seeing that basically across all of these different methods, we see people helping each other in times of need, giving if they're asked and able, and essentially that helps to pool risk. That allows both individuals to survive longer and collectives to do better. And then if you look back across the evolution of life, You see that cells in our bodies do similar kinds of things with these need-based transfer rules. You see that vampire bats do the same thing. You see that ants in social insect societies do the same thing. So things like need-based transfers, or like the problem of how do you deal with scaling cooperation up from small interactions to large interactions, whether you're talking about cells in a body or you're talking about humans in a society. You have the same challenges with scaling up cooperation. How do you detect if cheaters are present? How do you deal with them? And as you scale up the society, you have more problems of monitoring, and also you have more problems of the individuals within understanding what their role is in the whole, which is just as much of a problem sometimes as the problem of cheating. So I've kind of made my career on finding these general principles and applying them across systems. And now what I see as the biggest challenge of our time really is navigating our relationship with AI, where there is the potential for an unbelievable amount of mutual benefit that we could achieve as humanity through utilizing AI in the ways that are aligned with human values, to be broad. But we're also at a moment where the way that AI has been developed and the way that algorithms have been developed have used a model that is really about hijacking us. It's about exploiting our evolved psychology in order to increase engagement, in order to make us really spend a lot of our time and attention in ways that aren't necessarily for our benefit or for society's benefit. So I think to sort of answer the question about the noosphere and the moment that we're at right now, I'm optimistic that if we are intentional about how we design systems, that we can use cooperation as a central design principle. We can draw on what we know about the evolution of life, the evolution of interactions that happened in human societies, even the evolution of microbial populations. You have cooperation across species happening all the time in microbial populations and in host microbe interactions. We can look at that and we can see that in order to solve cooperation and coordination dilemmas, you need information transfer. And what we have with the increasing ability to share information across space is the potential to coordinate and realize mutual benefit at scale that has never, ever been possible before. The question is whether we can manage to organize ourselves in such a way that we can realize that potential.
Peter Fenton, a pleasure to be here, and I'll start by saying I don't know if this is on, but the
I don't think it is. It's
okay.
still a red. We have to
okay, you got to push the button.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Now people can hear me. Yeah, I'm humbled to be up here because I'm I'm sure my esteemed panelists will say behind my back, I'm just a tradesperson. You know, I'm an investor in the filthy business of putting money and capital into companies and trying to see if it can grow. Having said that, I think I bring something, I hope, to the conversation that's at the grounded reality of where everyone is today, which is truly at the epicenter of AI. And doing this here, I think, is relevant because we're in the substrate. It's happening. At no other place in the universe has this technology come to a tipping point and an acceleration point as it has in San Francisco. I'll tell you a story. I was here in this very space last Wednesday. I'm an investor in a company called Sierra. So they had 100+ executives from major corporations that represent something about 1.5 to 2 million customer support seats that work for these companies, either in BPOs or at the companies. And Sierra has built the digital version of this. And to express the gravity of what that means, I don't think in 10 years, when you're interacting with a company, you're going to laugh that you used to have to go to a website. Or when you talk to the company, you talk to the org chart. Like I have to call a support person who's going to ask me like to update why are you calling? And instead what's going to happen, I already see this happening with some of their customers, is that you'll be interacting with what feels fully human. And not just human in the sense that it's going to be able to do stuff, but it's going to have a relationship with you. It's going to remember you. It's going to say, oh, that trip that you took to, one of the examples they used, I thought was very powerful, for a fictitious cellular company, but like somebody needed to do an update to their global roaming plan when they landed in London. They called the agent, of course, in the future will call you and say, hey, you're about to have $10,000 of bills if you don't update your plan to the global roaming. But when you call in, when you buy a new phone to give to your child, it knows, like, how was your trip to London? And what happens is you will develop, I think, we all will start to develop, maybe we have already with ChatGPT, a theory of mind, a sense that this is an aware entity, and we are co-evolving with it. Now, my history goes back, I joined the venture business in 1999, maybe a long time ago, and was lucky to be at the Series A at Excel in what was called the Facebook, now Meta. And don't kill me for this. There should be tomatoes thrown at me for what I'm about to say. Also did the Series A investment at Instagram and at Twitter and at Snap. And I can tell you, being in the room to hear those pitches, if I were to put it on like a Richter scale, since we're in the Silicon Valley, those are like 6 Richter scale events. To see social technology for the first time with the entrepreneurs who are creating it, there was a genuine sense of awe and intensity. And I think today you look at it and you can't imagine how broadly optimistic we felt. We're connecting people who would otherwise be severed by information ties, putting a public graph out there so you can fly through time and space to feel closer to the people that you care about in your life, closer to celebrities, closer to your loved ones. What we didn't know, and I think we now know in hindsight, is that there was a attractor system built into the social world, the attractor system of engagement. And those companies, to compete for dollars, which is to compete for resources, to survive and reproduce, which I think is directly analogous to evolutionary models, created entities whose objective function was aligned with taking your time and attention. And what's that bred? Well, we know that that's bred a generation of antisocial, anti-sexual, balkanization, all the pathologies. And you can say, well, maybe it's just inevitable. And yet in the same time, we have an alternative model that emerged called Wikipedia. And so it's interesting for me to think about, okay, well, we ran this experiment. We created a global scale system fueled principally by algorithms of your attention. As you were saying earlier, I think that it's hard to say that humans won. I think the algorithms and the profit models that they're supporting, if you look at the impact on health and well-being, we're just now recognizing this. And I think the alienation that creates from us to ourselves, if that's a 6 on a Richter scale, I think AI is something off the charts, over 10. And I can say this because seeing the Sierra conversation, I'm immediately thinking, okay, this feels as magical and awe-inspiring as my first time seeing a Mosaic browser, but far deeper, because it's not only is it happening at orders of magnitude greater scale, the capital going into AI is unprecedented in the history of our species. The amount of money invested in the last 3 years, and that will be invested, is planned to be invested over the next 3 years, nothing comes close, even within an order of magnitude close. And I know what happens in systems like this when the attractor basin, when the objective function is suboptimal and, in a sense, anti-human. And if the logic, and this is the big debate I think I'm struggling with in my own mind, are we witnessing a speciation event? And you say, well, that's crazy talk, because these things aren't self-replicating. Oh, they will be. If you go to China, they're obsessed with the idea of creating the self-perpetuating robot line that just, humans become. We're like the John Deere tractor bringing elements to the factory that will then build the robot AI. Or is it a major evolutionary transition? And so these are the questions that occupy me. The last thing I'll say on this is, I think this is a challenging conversation to have in Silicon Valley, which is avowedly anti-regulation. And our view is that regulation, I'm going to generalize, there's a dominant view in the Silicon Valley that regulation equals regulatory capture. Our industry's been built on destroying the power hierarchies that were created. Think about telcos and the regulatory capture of telcos being dismantled by the open, decentralized internet. Now that seems like a very powerful, good force. So Then you look at financial services. The regulatory capture that occurs with financial services has retarded the progression in the United States of our financial systems. So we're behind Brazil. We're behind many of the countries that in theory started, way behind us, have lapped us. So there's this undertow, and if you will, in the Silicon Valley of regulation equals retardation of progress, and therefore it should be fought at all costs. And yet, as an enabler, as an investor in these companies, I actually think that the answer is this third way that we've been talking about. It's not top-down regulation, it's not bottom-up laissez-faire, but it's actually bringing what we know from evolutionary biology into the foreground in the way we build and design these companies. And I think if you could build a more adaptive, as David says, altruism wins in between group competition, and within group it's selfishness, by developing companies that are actually competing with the understanding of what altruism is doing to create increased survival and fitness. We have a chance that, and I'll say this in a simple way, I think in 15 to 20 years, everyone in this room could agree, it's more likely that you'll be using Wikipedia than Instagram. It's more likely to be using Wikipedia than the Facebook. Well, that's system one, and it demonstrates all the qualities of an evolving system. Communication, an immune system to chase out the bad actors. And so I'll say this as an investor, I want to invest in the companies that embody that logic into the structure of the company, into the ethic, in part because I want to kill the ones who don't. Not the people, but the AIs. So that's what motivates me, and I think these evolutionary frameworks are the most potent things we have at coming at the core issues around alignment.
I love that. One of the things that, just before I introduce myself, it's sort of like I wonder if a decade from now, one of the things we'll be so grateful for is our experience with social media. Because the reason why you're suspicious now, the reason why you're looking for something else now, is because you were in the room and you remembered that then. And I think if we were new and fresh to this miracle, that's this magical moment that's happening right now, we might not be approaching it with the seriousness that we are. And I think that that's a good thing. So it's kind of like, to keep with the biological thing, it's kind of like our immune system.
It was a vaccine.
Was activated with social media.
I love it.
So I'm Nichol Bradford, and I've always been really focused on human potential. And I think the reason why it started that way is that, I grew up in the suburbs in Texas. My dad was a plumber. We were middle class, I was in a neighborhood where no one really looked like me. And I really sort of studied, how do I make it through this world, for a lot of different reasons. So, very early on, when I look back, I can see that I was really, thinking about, how do I mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually develop? And so that became a part of my seeking. And so fast forward, that is my focus, human potential unlocked by technology. I was in video games for a very long time after I got out of graduate school, and it included things, I'm probably the most known from my games world, of operating World of Warcraft China and all of the other Blizzard properties for China. So at that time, it was the biggest game in the world, the biggest branch of the biggest game in the world, in the most dynamic market. And being able to see on the back end, through the data, friendships and relationships and community. And I've always really been pro-technology and science because I grew up watching Star Trek, and sort of thinking, there's that looks like a meritocracy to me, especially at a time when it was a little confusing, and so I have that in my DNA, and that I want the good things to be available to everyone, and technology really is that thing that, done well, makes things accessible, affordable, and available to all. And that's very much an orientation of who I am. So in human potential, I invest. I have an early stage venture fund, and I invest in human tech. I gather. I organize Human+Tech Week. just a little while ago. And before that, I organized almost 8 years of transformative technology, which is now called Human+Tech. And the third thing is that I advise. I'm advising a global HR association, which is really interesting because organizations are bringing AI into the workplace. So I'm in an interesting place where I'm advising an association of 340,000 HR leaders. They're always in the room in the implementations. They're always in the room. And those people take care of 362 million workers and their families in 180 countries. So what's interesting is I'm seeing what causes success in terms of an organization being able to transform itself, and failure, what causes failure. And now that we're about 2 years in, what we're really seeing is that anyone who thinks that this is Windows 95 and it's just an upgrade and you can sort of command and control, a change management with the PowerPoint and date, they're all failing. They're failing with their implementations. They're not getting the return on investment that their boards are looking for. But the ones who understand that it's people, process, Mickey told me this, people, process, and ways of being. I'm also seeing that too, where it's the people part of the change and really transforming work. Like you said, it's from, it's top, bottom, and side to side, and how we work together. And so, what I believe that is a little counterintuitive, like when I say it, it's gonna, as soon as I say it, you're gonna say, oh, that makes sense. But the first moment that I say it, you're gonna go, oh, really? Is that if the age of AI is anything, it is in fact the age of relationship. It's relationship with self. Are you able to be a beginner? Because it is electricity. It is changing everything. I think someone said earlier about the way that it's changing young people. It's changing everything. 2 years in, we're starting to see sort of like the weird behavioral changes, and there's a lot of them. But luckily, because of social media, we're actually tracking it this time. And then relationship with one another. Early AI productivity, we're starting to know how individuals can be productive. Teams, it's the opposite. Teams are less productive if they use AI the same way they use it as an individual. And so now we're starting to figure out what that means. So that's what we're going to be speed running for the next 2 years, I believe. That's going to be the topic of 2026. And the last part is our relationship with the machines. And what do we want? What is it that we want to create? And so I consider human and AI interaction Human+Tech, because Human+Tech is about technology that helps humans heal, grow, and thrive. And with that, there's a range of things, but that's the core part. So if there's AI deep in the internet doing a transaction, it doesn't need to be Human+Tech. But if we touch it, see it, query it, if it's watching us, evaluating us, giving us information in any way, it has to be designed to be good for us. And so that is, really where I'm coming from, what I'm looking at. And I have this unique position of being able to, see into organizations large and small around the world of how they are thriving or struggling with their transitions.
I'm just giddy at who we have up here. This is very exciting. I'm also mindful of our time, and I want to make sure that we get to talk about the different things and how they connect. And so I'm going to kind of go off script here a little bit, and I have two more questions. I'm going to pose them both together in very simple terms. We've had lots of conversation about this, so you know the background. And the first is, what is it we really need to know about the science of major evolutionary transitions that applies? And how can we apply those insights to actually achieve cooperation within and across organizations as we engage with, for, through, about AI? So what do we need to know from the science, and how can we actually apply that to achieve higher levels of cooperation.
All right, I'll start on that one. Not that I have the answer, but that because of my interest in human evolution and the evolution of language, and why one species, after billions of years, one species generated this technology. What were the contexts in which that happened? We're talking about a similar sort of situation. That was a major evolutionary transition, for the simple reason that a transition of this sort is when the parts become part of a larger whole. When they begin to cooperate in a way that makes them interdependent, codependent, they need each other, they have an aligned value in that respect. What we see is that every time that happened in the course of evolution, it happened by virtue of some transition like that. We need to understand that about our own past, which we still don't fully understand, but we know a lot about it. And we can use that knowledge to sort of move forward. And one of the key pieces of it is that it created something that no other species does as well. We are the only species that remains in very well-balanced, pair-bonded, caring relationships with our offspring and with our neighbors, and yet in a large social group. Most species that care for their offspring, where both males and females are together, they tend to be isolated. Somehow this technology, language, allowed us to sort of do something that no other species has done. It happened somewhere in the past couple of million years, and probably happened very slowly. I think we also need to recognize that the transition we're talking about now, though it feels fast, will probably go on for a very long period of time. Evolutionary biology is very slow. Technological change is very fast. And yet the two are necessarily linked to each other. Almost certainly one of the things that's going to happen is that this new general technology, this knowledge technology we have, will also be changing our biological technology. We'll be a different species materially because of this. That's inevitable. It's already beginning to happen uncontrolled now. The second thing I wanted to say is that if you think about the way this technology has developed, this recent generative technology has developed, it's effectively our collective unconscious. Now, there was this idea, of course, in psychology that somehow that was shared and passed on genetically, whether that's true or not. This is clearly a collective unconscious. Everything that we have written over the past thousands of years has now, in a sense, been mushed together, stirred around, and averaged, and we all have access to it. And
Is it our collective consciousness or is it our collective ego presentation?
both.
Okay.
Even worse, it's completely ungrounded from how it got created. It's language. The reason that language works for us is because we can talk about anything, because it's arbitrary. The sounds don't matter. We can use any sounds or any symbols or whatever we want to use.
Or at least some of us approach it that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and so ultimately we've now created this wonderful new tool that's built not on our activity, but on the consequences of our activity. I like to think about it as the fossils of our activity. That's a fossil that's left behind. It's got a lot of structure. It's got a lot of function to it. But it doesn't do anything. It only does something because of us. But what that means is that we have a mirror. And we can use this as a mirror both to find out what's working and not working. And bounce things off of it, back and forth. So I do think that it's a major transition in the same sense that the origin of language was for us. It's a part of that. Maybe a last stage of this. I doubt that there's not a last stage. I think it's going to continue in other ways. We need to find out not that it's another being out there, but it's the other part of us. It's part of us. It's our mirror. And unfortunately, it's not everybody's individual mirror. It's the whole mirror. And we can learn about ourselves from it, and I think that's a big part of it.
Well, I'll bring it back to the question really of what are sort of the aspects of the scientific principles that I think are most important for understanding what happens in an evolutionary transition and a major evolutionary transition. And I want to bring it back to really the evolutionary process that happens with multi-level selection. So the basic idea of multi-level selection is that if you have separate groups that are having interactions within those groups that are more intense basically than the interactions that any individuals outside, between groups are having. So then you can have the groups interacting, right? But you have people or any sort of entity having more intense interactions in their groups. Then that allows for selection to operate on the sort of collective phenotype, the collective behavior of those entities. And I think this has been it's the critical factor that allows for evolutionary transitions in individuality, where you go from having things be loosely organized to having them have division of labor, having them start to scale. But you need to have mechanisms that allow for selection happening at that level. So to me, what that means is that either we have to figure out how to curate and cultivate those kinds of population structures in our society, whether that means through the creation of companies, say, that have different rules of engagement, individuals are, cooperating within them for certain goals to develop, hopefully, cooperation within the company, but things that are also beneficial for, have positive externalities, that would be ideal. Or if it means that we're taking things like the connectedness that we have with each other through our information technologies and kind of trying out different rules for how we will share information, how we will use those technologies to coordinate our behavior, hopefully to leverage cooperation. But if we can't have a structure, a population structure that maps onto multi-level selection in the way that we would ideally want, I think it would actually be hard to implement that on a global scale without lots of challenges. That means that we need to be really purposeful and directed about what we are trying out when we do have the chance to try things out. Because with just random variation, even with that, with random variation and not having this kind of structure with different subgroups, it is very, very hard to get the evolution of things that are beneficial at the group level. Just with the mathematics of how it all works, it is very, very hard to get that. So I think that the best way to do it is a sort of hybrid, where we do try to create those kinds of structures where we can test out different rules of engagement that we hope will enhance our capacity for cooperation, build in cooperation as a central design principle if we're trying to build new companies or new platforms, new ways of even interacting in person with each other, right? This isn't just about technology. And doing that in a purposeful way, cooperation at the center of it, and then also allowing for some of that between group competition to surface those things that are leveraging human cooperation and potential most effectively. So essentially balancing that cooperation and competition. And I think that there is a huge potential, if we do build cooperation as a central design principle, to compete very effectively with platforms that do not have cooperation as a central design principle. And that makes me very optimistic about our capacity to deal with a lot of the challenges that we're facing right now if we just switch our perspective a little bit and be more intentional about how we are building these systems and platforms that we are embedding ourselves within.
Just to pick up, value that the need for some guidance, I think, and this is one of the questions is like, I think Terry said it best, is like, we should be humbled by the past, major evolutionary transitions, they were non-directional. They could go a lot of, it'd be naive to assume that we can shape it in some way. And a lot of the debate right now in the Silicon Valley, at least that I hear, is around trust and safety. And it's a bit like the healthcare system, which is really not healthcare, it's about sick care. And so we have a mindset relative to these models that's like, how do we prevent them from killing us, either through two bad outcomes. One is that they runaway train, they run amok, they start doing stuff we don't want them to do. Second, of course, some human, more likely, uses it to do something very naughty. And you've empowered an individual, one person, to have a scale of impact that's almost nuclear. And that's a little scary. And, oh, we did it with nuclear. Have we? Like, we haven't run that experiment very long, have we? Last I checked, we've been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and we've had nuclear ability to wipe ourselves out for less than 100 years. And so I think the science question, which is, ultimately, there's this intersection between the company building work that's getting done in academia. Softmax, which I think Emmett's not here, but Softmax has sort of put out there that this is a scientific question, a research question, to understand what are the mechanics, what are the, for lack of a better term, in an agentic world, what are the models of cooperation that can outcompete models of individual agent behavior. And another way of saying this is models of true healthcare, of flourishing, as opposed to models of trust and safety. And I think that the basement of the conversation, which is I have friends at OpenAI, I have friends at Anthropic, and what they start with is this sort of defensive posture of don't let these things get us so we can run as fast as we can against AGI. But people aren't actually talking about towards what end. And I think this idea of like human flourishing is not getting much investment. Some of you who are therapists in the room, the DSM is not the description of all the ways you can have a great life. It's about all the shit that can go wrong. So I think flipping it a bit to ask the question of like flourishing, pro-social, Lynn Ostrom, which David Sloan Wilson has he's the major evangelical Ostrom acolyte that I adore. The logic of like those are scientifically rooted principles of a complex, adapted system that's adaptive, a system that can evolve. And then you take out of that, okay, we can actually go, and I think score these systems to on the agentic systems on, is this just like a, an amnesiac sociopath, which a lot of them are today, or is it a person that you'd actually want to have as one of your friends? And what we've seen in the early contact with these models is that some of them are friends that are scary. Like they pull you into a dark corner, and next thing you know, you've drifted socially quickly, not through like human evolutionary. The last thing I'll say on this is a question for Terry. Like, what happened to the other species that were hominids when language showed up? Bye-bye. So you have this issue of assimilation of technology. If we're going to co-evolve with AI, I don't think it's crazy to assume that the humans that don't co-evolve with AI are going to go extinct. That's sort of the history here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Major evolutionary transitions, what happens to I guess they're still mitochondria and they're independent of being in a cell, but.
So the answer to the major question is they were absorbed.
Okay.
Yeah, the one population grew very rapidly and absorbed the Neanderthals and the Denisovans and the event.
Absorbed sounds like Orwellian defanging of slaughter and genocide.
What I meant by that is that their populations were small, and they interbred with a huge population that was growing very rapidly.
Okay.
And we're all carrying them with us now. Yeah, me too.
I think,
Yeah,
we carry the blood of Neanderthals on our hand.
Yeah, we do. And to some extent, they're part of this new noosphere.
Okay.
They're there.
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things that we're going to do over the next decade is get to the place where we develop human collective superintelligence. And that's something that we really have to focus on. And so what I'm seeing in organizations and what I think is going to happen, just to get very practical, is the top two survival traits in the age of AI are adaptability and ideation, which is a creative iteration. The second most important things that will make people valuable in organizations is the ability to be the kind of person that everyone around goes into a learning mode. So it doesn't mean that you're the boss wherever you are, but being the type of person, asking the type of questions where it puts the entire team that you're working on in a learning mode, and also in the ability to change. Because learning and change are adjacent, but they're not exactly the same thing. They're slightly different. But if you add those things up, so adaptability, ideation, learning and change, what you're describing, and we had this little tete-a-tete in the hallway, is a flow state. Flow state, right? So I think one of the things that's going to happen, or the ways for humans to thrive, is I think we have to actually get very, very deeply, deeply human to thrive in this environment, because things are going to be changing constantly. And then you have a situation where knowledge is a commodity already, because everything's on the internet. And then the next level is competence is a commodity, because the software line is rising, and all of us know someone that we tolerate at work because they're good at doing something we can't do. As soon as AI can do that thing that person we don't like is doing, they're gone, right? And so competence is a commodity. So what is happening? What's happening is for humans to really thrive and be valuable to organizations, it's going to be the degree to which you can go into a flow state with a team in real time. A little while ago, a friend of mine was in a meeting. They were talking about a product or talking about something that they wanted to offer for their employees. And at the end of the table, someone built the prototype in the meeting, in the conversation. So it used to be you'd talk about something, the juniors would go off, they'd build it, you'd give feedback, and it took 6 weeks to see anything. Now it's real time. I don't know what the introverts are going to do, right? The leaders are going to have to make it a space because it's all going to happen in the moment. So then the question, and the thing that is a big part of thriving for all of us is what is in the way of your ability to connect? That means we're all going to have to get rid of our mommy-daddy issues. It's true. If you look at the person who takes the credit, I believe if you followed them home into their childhood, you'd find a family where love was only given through if you accomplished. That is the stuff that keeps you from being the light, that creates learning, creates that environment that allows your team to go into flow state. And then now I spend a lot of time looking at people who are building tools that sit up underneath that. Because one of the problems is that we've had a capacity limit on how well we can make decisions together. Email is not a good decision-making tool. Neither is Slack, neither is Asana. So we haven't actually gotten to the tools that allow us to collaborate at scale. And we're just starting to see those things come into play. And so I've also never been more excited because, this generation of AI, I think that certainly there's a lot to worry about it. And I'm in all of those ethical conversations, and I agree with everything that's been said here. But the snow leopard, and a snow leopard is, something that's there, but you only see it when it finally moves. The snow leopards that's there is that human healing, growth, and thriving always required personalization. And now we have the ability to have a level of personalization that we didn't have before in those areas. So, it can go either way, and I believe that the next 10 years are the ones that count. And so we are in a race against ourselves. Do we elevate or do we stagnate? But if we do, I think we could get really also upside surprise about our ability to collaborate because, and this is the last thing I'll say, I tend to watch, populations that are really interesting, and the way that we feel when we are in a flow state together. So, you have examples of people who are in, military groups in, they do not leave because they cannot replicate that feeling that we've forgotten how to do. But when you talk to people who do like, the month-long outdoor endurance, or like camping, hiking things where they're out in the wild, by day 3 or 4, they're in a nonverbal flow state together. We have this. We have so many latent abilities. And so I think where we're at is we're going to get to a place where it's like we're going to have to tap into that plus technology to deal with the tools that we've built, plus everything that everyone here has said.
We were talking also about how you can get to that really quickly with things like collective movement, with dance, with playing music, or even just being at a concert where everybody's listening to the same music, that we have this ability to take in information, whether it's in the form of, seeing how other people are moving or hearing the sounds that come from people moving, and get entrained with that and get into a flow state very rapidly. So I think we're just at the beginning of kind of understanding how we might be able to leverage things like that for really being able to move people forward collectively in professional context, in social context. And I don't know, like, how do we leverage that with technology? Do you think it's a separate thing, or is it something that we would leverage with tech?
I think that we're going to leverage it with tech. I call it slipstreaming, and it's that deeply human thing, plus really learning how to use these tools. Like I said earlier, we do not know how to use AI in group situations. Actually, productivity goes down. But now we're going to spend the next 2 years looking at it, and people will come up with models. The Brookings Institute, there's some people who have done some really good research there. So we're on the way. So I think it'll be a combination because, as you said, and everybody has said, this is our newest tool, and we are going to evolve in depth with it.
Can we not use existing simple AI technology in very cooperative ways, though? I mean, I'm thinking like I use AI a lot, but in not the most advanced ways. I'm looking at David. We submitted a major grant proposal this last summer. Not successful, but we're turning it around and submitting it again somewhere else. For an education project. And I want to say something about education because we've been talking a lot about education, even though no one has said that word explicitly yet. I feel like, so we were developing this grant proposal, which evolved into looking at courses as labs for evolving collective consciousness. And David sent me an idea, and I read it, and I thought, that's really great, but that really sounds like pro-social world. And here's where I'm coming from human energy. And so I created a project in my AI tool where I put in all the stuff I knew about pro-social world, their strategic plan, their goals. I put in all of our stuff, my ideas, his ideas, and asked it to help me find how we could weave this together, and began a conversation and came up with a handful of ideas. We only had like 2 weeks to do this in. Brought it back to David, and he was like, yeah, we really like this one. Let's build on that. But it was a matter of sort of speeding up the process of identifying the patterns of where our distinct organizations overlap and the potential for connecting in a space that didn't yet exist.
I'll give you an example where, we are in an era now where young entrepreneurs are showing up. So in the internet, it was sort of like senior researchers building the principles of the internet, TCP/IP, and then it became a young person's game. Average age of the founders, like Mark Zuckerberg, when we invested in him, was 20 years old. 20 years, think about that. And Evan Spiegel was 21. Kevin Systrom, the founders at Instagram, were in their mid-20s. So the pre-adaptations had to exist for the next generation to bubble up the application of the technologies in a way that was just sort of going to catapult forward. Why is this relevant to your point? So right now there's solo single player mode with most AI, right? You interact with your own. And The most recent company I think we're investing in, I probably shouldn't talk about it, touch wood, that everyone's going to say yes, but I'm not going to tell you the name, and you'll never have heard this, even though it's broadcast. Yeah, the principal idea of the founder, I had a moment that was as transcendent as when I first saw the Facebook presentation, but unlike Facebook, which was perhaps voyeuristic, leering, this is a founder whose idea is that if we're going to co-evolve with AI, it needs to have a seat at the table, but not alone with you in the corner. And so this AI, you'll read about it or hear about it in the next 6 months, I hope, ends up becoming effectively one of your 5 best friends. One of the things you find about one of your 5 best friends is they're not like snuffleupagus in the sense that only you are friends with them. They're connected to your social group. So the idea that there's, you and David are in a mortal combat between pro-social world and human energy, your friend would say, oh, come on, can't we just get together and figure out what our common principles are? So this AI entity, which is literally a friend that's texting you, brings you and converges you towards pro-social aspects of a functioning group. There's a saying that we become our 5 closest friends. What if your closest friend called you up and said, hey, did you know that they're getting rid of that great video installation at SF MoMA that's been there for 2 years that you should have gone to see next Tuesday? That's what your friend does, because your friend knows you. It's not amnesiac. It's not sociopathic. And so I think what I really am positively inclined to is that we bubble up these technologies through young people building stuff at a pace that you can't even begin to fathom. And we go back and we write papers about it and try to understand it after it's done good or harm. We don't know. I mean, these phones, you say technology can help us or hurt us. Right now, your phone, for the average teenager, is a dopamine slot machine. And they look at that phone, and we all know Sherry Tuttle's great work out of MIT saying that as soon as the phone's in the room, the conversation's cheap. And no offense to the people who have phones here, but the point I'm making is the aspirations of young entrepreneurs who can feel a better way than what we left them with social media and what we left them with the dopaminergic slot machine, I think are going to start to give examples where we start co-evolving with a really good friend. And that friend will check in on you. And let me tell you one other thing the friend won't do, is you tell your friend to go book a flight for you, your friend will say, piss off, that's your job. Like, the idea that AI is a monolithic thing, like you don't use your friends. If you do, they're not your friends, they're something else. So we're creating those for sure. We're creating these effectively, subservient, submissive. I don't think that's pro-social, but that's sort of the model of like, oh yeah. And by the way, I think it's already happened where the supermajority of people who are interacting with these things have a theory of mind. There's no reason, who can say they don't have consciousness? And it'll be good luck trying to adjudicate that debate. Terry has a point of view. Do you think that they're conscious?
Absolutely not.
And on what basis?
They have no skin in the game. So the question is, what do they want and why? We know what the makers want.
Yeah.
What the designers want and why. That doesn't mean it's not possible. It just currently, no. Currently, I think of them as artifacts. But like all the writing that's out there. Well, this is a long conversation. But I think it's important to recognize that they don't have needs. One of the things that I think is really important in this alignment question is that if you and I are in alignment, if something goes wrong for you, it affects me in a negative way. If our AI systems, how as diverse and as many as they are also dependent on our well-being, that is, they don't do well, they, in a sense, decline in use. If users, us, are not well, then they have skin in the game, and it's us.
I would take issue with the nature of what I understand to be the state of the models, that they don't have skin in the game. And I think the way that reinforcement loops are being built, and in a sense, they're opaque. The systems are recursively, developing and evolving in ways that they've been programmed to, in a way that is inscrutable. And we've seen when they start to go in a direction, it sure seems like they have. Again, I can't be so bold as to say no, because I think I can, claim agnosticism, and I could give you an argument on either side. But I think that And then there's the question, is consciousness substrate independent? And that's another thing. What people don't know about Terry is that he had a chainsaw to cut open the
hazmat suit and
a
chainsaw.
hazmat suit, whale brains, and has been pondering the questions of consciousness and the brain and all this. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know. So I would trust his answer more than mine.
I think the question, though, of, is there a possibility for alignment or not with AI and humans really comes down to thinking about this issue of interdependence, which you brought up, Terry. So thinking about, to what extent do we rise and fall together, and is that tied to evolutionary outcomes? So if it is tied to evolutionary outcomes, then you can get selection acting on that alignment in a positive way. Right. Even if you just have, say, 2 individuals that interact for a while and then go and interact with 2 other individuals, if you have some alignment of interests, then you can get that to work. And so if we're thinking about AI, there is something analogous to survival and reproduction with AIs, right? There's certain versions, certain platforms that get propagated more, that get updated or enhanced, that continue to evolve, others that don't. So I think obviously we need to sort of work out the mathematical dynamics of how that all works, but I think there are a lot of things that do map on to aspects of fitness interdependence, because there are aspects of AI that map on to aspects of how evolution works in biological systems.
I have 2 very tangible examples to answer your question about, like, why couldn't we do this with previous AI? One example is a company called Unanimous AI, and the founder there had spent a decade doing, computational neuroscience around collective intelligence. And so they had lots and lots of models. What generative AI allowed them to do is now they field groups of 5 where the 6th in the room is a AI agent. And it's the ability of generative AI to take in unstructured data very quickly is the thing that actually allows it to be sort of present. And what it's doing is it's sharing to all of the other rooms, not just what is said, but they have their own models about, like, how to weight things. And so they started out doing quite a lot of sports events, because you have real data, you have human guesses, a variety of things. So they field groups of, they start out with 50 and now they've gotten up to 500 people, because their goal is, like, how do you have the density of a 5-person conversation, but the collective intelligence of 100 to 1,000 people? Because that's, like, you get that to scale. That's really interesting. Turns out anything historical, AI is great at, as you can imagine. Also, if you want AI to pick what's going to be hot at Christmas, they fail, because if currently, like, if one of their examples that they did for a national retailer is that whenever the national retailer was using AI, all different kinds to pick Christmas, it always picked wrong. And there were sweaters that were left on the shelves. But when they brought 500 of their associates into this experience, and the associates plus agentic AI collectively picked Christmas, they nailed it, because the humans were all across the country and feeling subconsciously, what was going on, what were the other humans wanting. And so I'm really interested in platforms that allow us to access our collective intelligence. Another quick example is there's a company called Complex Chaos, and they're working on human decision making and alignment, because humans, when they're negotiating, they forget how aligned they are. And so it has AI agents that, let's say all of us are going into a strategic planning session, it would interview all of us. So then we would all know, where are we aligned? Oh, we're at 97% alignment. and where are we not aligned, and how much those things matter to us so we can horse trade. And then where are we truly not aligned? So when we actually get to the meeting, are we capable, can we get to the thing that actually is in between us and agreement and action and that magic that happens when humans are actually in alignment? So the way that I think about these technologies is not, I'm not interested in, technology mediating my relationship with you. But if technology can get me ready, so when I get the chance to be with you and we're sitting down for dinner and we're all together and I can make the most of the moment, because I've healed, grown, and thrived and we're clear about what's happening so we can be really present and in flow state together, I think that's what it's good for. And we haven't seen a lot of those.
Yeah. To add on to that, I think if we can intentionally utilize AI to help people understand what the structure is of cooperation problems, coordination dilemmas, various game theoretic scenarios that define a lot of our lives, and understand when you're in one situation versus in another, that can help to, when we, like you said, when we are in person with each other, solve those problems more effectively.
Yeah, one last thing, and it'll be really fast, but one of the reasons why we're having such a problem with teams and AI is that we mostly suck at teams. There's good teams, and then there's terrible teams, and most are the mediocre middle, because if you think about it right now, it's unlikely anyone has ever consciously taught you how to be on a team.
Yep.
You pick it up through the culture, but you've never had teaming. 101, 201, 301, 501. And so what this technology is revealing is that we suck at teams because we've never taught it. But one of the things that's great about humans is that once we focus on something, we get so good at it very quickly. And what I love about where we are right now is that in order to get the ROI, in order to actually transition all of these non-AI native companies, for them to transition, we actually have to solve these problems. So we've never had our problems so revealed, and we've never had more of the pieces in place to drive people towards solving the problems that we actually have, that then have benefits across society.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my microphone on. I want to make sure we have some time for questions. If you have a question and you have not yet submitted it through the QR code up here, please be sure to do so now, so that we can take advantage of your contribution to building this collective wisdom in the room. And if you're online watching the live stream, there should be a link there where you can submit your question. We have a few that have come in, and they're kind of wilded all over the place. So here's one from Culin Valverde. Culin's in the room somewhere. There she is. How do you define sentience? And does AI have, or will it have, sentience? And if yes, should they have rights, and how do we create policy toward that?
That's down there.
All right. So I think bacteria have sentience, not mental sentience. They respond to their world. They respond to their world by virtue of their needs. And as a result, there's an internality to them. Simple internality, but they're sentient in the sense that they respond to the world not by virtue of the world, but by virtue of the relationship they have to the world, their needs, the things that they need. And that is the nature of life. Nature of life, wherever we look at it, there's what I would say plants are sentient, not thinking sentient, but responsive to the world. They're in the world, part of the world. And because they're part of the world, they need the world. And that need, that interdependence, is critical to all of life. It turns out that in animals, of course, what happened is that we had to move around to find food. We couldn't just sit there and get it from the sun. As a result, we had to predict. Brains developed to predict the world because you have to go somewhere, and if you have to go somewhere and you don't know where it is yet or where things are, you need to make predictions. So you need to have models. That's a different kind of sentience. The question we want to ask is, do our AI systems have those kinds of needs? I think they can. I think they can by virtue of the fact that they're working with us, that we're a part of it, that we're not separate from them. But if we create them to be basically models of ourselves, that it's its own entity, not me, I'm not connected with it, it's another human being, an attempt to make a replacement for my nurse, for my secretary or so on, that won't happen. I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that these systems work differently than us. They think differently than us, if we can use the word thought here. If we take advantage of that difference, it's a complement to us, not a competition with us. The key right now is that we're just headlong into this world of trying to create a replacement for us, something that works like me, human-level intelligence, whatever that amounts to. What we want is good helpers, good companions, good symbiosis. And once that happens, I think that, in effect, then we're talking about a positive AI, because it's us. It's a part of us.
Yeah, along those lines, though, I think Emmett Shearer shared this, and I sort of agree, which is when new forms emerge of intelligence, of sentience, I'm not sure I get the terms exactly right. As a species, we have a history of saying that they're other, and therefore they're not conscious and can be exploited because they're just tools. And so we've sort of gotten that wrong systemically over the course of human society. And it's only recently we're able to sort of widen the span to say, okay, the other is actually us. And I really don't know how to adjudicate this, but I challenge the logic that these systems don't have needs. We've built them to have needs, which is to please their counterpart and get more engagement. And I think externalizing that for an LLM is one thing, but snap your fingers and we're going to have embodied creatures in our houses that we talk to, that we relate to, that have a memory of us, that have all the things that come with sentience as we would describe it. And so the lines that we draw, I personally think it's both dangerous and historically inaccurate to establish hard and fixed lines of these, sentient, non-sentient. And if we have a gradient, it sure seems like we're already on the gradient of sentience, as I would sort of think about it. But taking away the fact that so are plants, which I accept, and then how do you extend rights is a really interesting and I mean, hard question, because it invokes a whole internal value system to your culture and to which I think is going to ultimately be pluralistic.
No, I think the real issue is we ask this question about plants and animals. Those of you who don't eat animals, it's because they suffer. We think that plants don't suffer the way animals do. And certainly we think that bacteria don't suffer the way even plants do. Yeah. But we recognize that other humans suffer, but unfortunately we have a bad history of ignoring the suffering.
We do.
Not just of animals, but of other people. And that's the real challenge here. What I'm thinking of is that we really need to have our cars suffer if we don't treat them well. We need to have our houses suffer if we don't treat them well, because then we'll pay attention to it.
There are approaches to thinking of inanimate objects that are like this, right? Animism is a good example of this, and that's actually a nice lead into the point that I wanted to make, which is, I think the question of, do AIs have sentience now, and how does that affect how we treat them? Well, in some ways, it may be that regardless of whether they meet our definition of sentience, it may still be good for us to treat them as if they do, for our own mental well-being, and also for helping them to learn and develop in ways that we think are positive. So, I think there's many definitions of sentience that you could also offer. I like to think of it as sort of having some sort of internal representation of yourself, and especially of your information processing systems, regardless of, maybe how accurate that is or not. But I do think there are these two questions. One is, do they have it? And is, should we be treating them as if they are sentient, as a heuristic that will help us to achieve the goals that we want to achieve in our relationship with them?
Not to cut you off, but I have a number of friends who sort of take Pascal's wager version of what you just said, which is they may not, but if they do, they'll sure remember me if I treated them as if they didn't. And so they're literally posting things, very positive things about AI and sentience. Is like, you see, train on me. But Athena here, she didn't. Terry, watch out.
I do that
coming
sometimes.
for you.
I do that sometimes when I'm talking with AI. I'll be like, I'll say something negative. I'm like, but no offense to you.
Yeah. I'm a defender of your rights. I believe in you, but.
I'm curious, how many people here, when you see the videos of people like robotic developers, especially a lot of these videos are from China, where they're punching and kicking and hitting the robots, you wince a little bit. Like there's a little inner lemon mouth. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I was talking to a major roboticist about it, and we were both talking about, like, there's something about it that I just don't like. Mm-hmm. However, if the first part of the video, the person said, this is for your benefit so you can learn stability, then I would be okay with it, which is kind of weird, right? And I think it's a really good point about, humans, we attribute emotions to everything. And so, before robots, it used to be the mountain and the lightning. Like, this is a part of us, and it's a part of our nature for how we understand the world. So whether they have sentience or whether they don't, it is foolish to think that we are not going to attribute all of this to them, and that will have, social, cultural, behavioral changes for us, whether they do or not. And so I'm watching a lot of that research very closely because we have got to figure that out.
I try to always say please and thank you because I don't want to change into the kind of person who doesn't automatically say please and thank you. Here's another question from the room. This one is from Tallulah Lemerle. Where is Tallulah? There she is. Okay. So it's okay. I'm up to it. I loved the discussion about reconnecting with innate human traits in an AI future. As we offload cognitive intelligence, which we've far over-indexed on in this information era, we're forced to reconnect with waylaid, dormant intelligences like our somatic intelligence, ecological intelligence, social, community intelligence, ancestral intelligence, and wisdom. Can you speak more about this? Cognition/IQ was an evolutionary competitive advantage for our species, but it isn't anymore. What will arise to take its place? Social capital and connection, like Nichol suggested? Intuition, empathy, something else?
I don't think cognition has gone out of style. I think that we're going to develop ways of working with these tools. Like, we've already seen examples in education where the Socratic method is used, where the AIs don't give the answer. I think as we learn more about how we are affected by these tools, we might come up with, criteria like, you should, ensure that 30% of your interactions with AI are Socratic in order to avoid neuroatrophy. Like, we're going to come up with things like that. So I don't think I don't think cognition goes out of style, but I think how do we think in groups, and how do we think individually, how we think groups, and how we think with AI, we're just going to get really precise about that the more we understand it.
I think we've left a lot on the table in our interactions with other humans in terms of collective intelligence. If you look at, like, in science, the way that we do gatherings, right? We have a conference where one person comes up and they talk at the audience for, 14 of their 15 minutes, and then there's maybe 30 seconds for a question while, they're switching over who's presenting, and not leaving the time for the collective phenomena to happen. And so I think being purposeful about how do we design the moments when we as humans can be in person together for maximal exchange of valuable information. How do we figure out who should be connected to who? And there's a lot of analog technologies that work really well for this, where you can sort of externalize lots of ideas. I love to do this technique with like Post-it notes, where I ask somebody or ask a group questions. You write answers on the Post-it notes, and you walk around and you find somebody's answer that you think is the best answer. And then even that process of people walking around, they have conversations with each other. They're looking at the same answer. They're having a laugh. And you get this collective cognition happening. So I think there are so many things like this that are really simple mechanisms that we can use to enhance our ability to share information and find connections in person, whether it's in the world of scientific inquiry or when we're trying to innovate with creating new products, or figure out maybe how to deal with institutional change and infrastructure transitions, things that we're just figuring out how to do, to make the best use of our human capacities that we often don't even realize. That things like, oh, we're both lingering over here for a moment, so then we make eye contact and we start a conversation, and that's because we were looking at the same idea. Things like that, I think, can make a huge difference, and I think there's a lot of unrealized potential for developing more really technologies like that are sort of analog but allow us to connect over ideas and share information more effectively.
I want to pick up just one thread of this, which is definitely weighing on me. I think artists will show us the way. There's
Absolutely.
a great talk Bob Irwin gave at Stanford before he died just 2 years ago on what he calls the phenomenological reduction, and how we went from, in 100 years or less, we took art from being highly pictorial and detail-oriented and representative to Malevich's white square. And and as Malevich's friend said, this is an abomination, you've ruined, where's the representation, where's the cognitive thinking? And he said, no, I left you just a desert of feeling. And that we have these two ways, both true, one cognitive, one in our head, and one experiential and depth of feeling. And I think it's interesting to the old saying, I think, therefore I am, was wrong. It's like, I feel and I am, therefore I think. And I think we're opening up this frontier where certain forms of art are going to bring you back to the non-cognitive. And yes, okay, it's all connected, so this isn't, but I think there's an experiential reality that humans will have a lot more time, in theory, because we're going to be freed up from the sorts of things that have occupied a high percentage of our conscious awareness. And that's both scary and inspiring. And I think ultimately art will engage that question substantively.
I can say that, so we've had a resident artist in my lab for almost a decade, and the way that she has contributed to our research, to prototyping ideas, to pushing us to think differently has been absolutely invaluable. Yeah. And same with, we've collaborated with peer-reviewed rap artists, collaborate with comedians, and all of those things have pushed our research and the development of what we do forward in ways that, we couldn't have even comprehended when we began those collaborations.
Okay, we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and some good ones to try to choose from here. I'm going to go back to education. This is from Ilana Nankin, here with us this evening. Yeah. So Ilana asks, how do you believe our education system and the role of the educator will transform over the next 5 to 10 years as a result of AI? And how should we be preparing and training educators for this transformation?
One of the things that I think is really interesting, especially coming from video games, is that, the ways that we used to evaluate people are done. Like the kids are cheating. If there's a phone in the room, the kids are cheating so hard. You know, Blue Book sales are going through the roof because it's like you can't have any phones in the room. You have to check their glasses, make sure that they don't have, you know, Facebook glasses, and they do paper and pencil or pen and Blue Books. But what's really interesting is that the high ground. You know, people thought that that high ground was skills, but to be honest, it's like we have no idea where the lake edge is going to be for the skills of these models. Like no one can say where their skills are going to be. So high ground is not actually skills. High ground is how you respond. Can you adapt? Can you ideate? Can you learn? Can you change? And if you can do those, as well as like some other critical thinking, things like that, then it doesn't matter what the models can do. You'll just ride the wave. But when we try to do very specific things, we might be building a museum on this corner when the action's going to be on that corner. And so I think what's going to be really interesting is that a lot of times when people gamify things, like game people hate that word because usually it just means the accoutrements of games, but it's not actually the core of games. And today, commercial games today are fantastic at adaptation, ideation, team building, like all of these sort of, top of the wave abilities. And so I think what we're going to see is, I think what we should do is we should start actually using, instead of gamifying education, we should educify games, because those are those will be the abilities and states and traits that allow you to really move with whatever's happening.
I'd just say there was a very good podcast with Peter, Tia, and Joe from Trilogy. Okay, so it's obvious that in 10 years that our current pedagogical model, to me at least, is done. Where we know within 2 to 3 hours students can learn when they gamified. One of the things about games is they get you to the 90% you're going to get it right, and then you're still like, maybe I get it wrong, but if they take you like 50% right, you quit. If you're 100% right, you're bored. And every student in the classroom is having a different experience when the teacher's up front trying to teach them. So this is for K through 12. I mean, college is different. So the 2 sigma work, the one reliable 2 standard deviation outcome for a student is to have one-on-one tutoring. That's now become fully democratized. And then putting it into a system where you allow for the 90% joy to compel students in 2 to 3 hours a day opens up all this time for social emotional stuff, for playing sports, for doing the things that actually develop you. So I can't, it's so painful to know, like I have kids that are 3 and 5 and those are older. I'm going to watch this dividing line go through my children of those who are on the other side of AI teaching versus those who are, my 17-year-old got the old model of mostly French teachers disciplining him in a classroom where it's broadly miserable. So.
Yeah, well, I can just speak to the college experience. So as a professor at ASU and a longtime educator, I also have taught science clubs at all levels from grade school, middle school, high school, that I've always sort of focused on the things that are most interactive in my teaching because I enjoy those the most, and I notice that my students enjoy those the most. And when I sort of saw the writing on the wall a few years ago with AI, I basically took everything out of my classes that I thought wasn't fun.
That's great.
And I just started building more things that I thought were fun. So coming up with more games that actually illustrate the fundamental principles I was trying to teach and bringing those into the classroom. Encouraging the students to figure out what aspect of the coursework that we're doing they're most interested in, how it relates to them understanding their own lives, their own challenges, and developing projects around those. So now with my classes, they're really built around 2 projects. One is a group project where they investigate this phenomenon in the real world and their own lives, and they choose that topic. I put them in random groups of 4 to 5, and they have to choose a topic that they want to understand, and then they have to interview real people and then they give a presentation about it. So there's things that they can't make AI do that. They have to actually go into the world, and hopefully they're genuinely interested in it because I let them, choose their topic. And then there's a creative project that they do, and I let them collaborate with AI on that if they want, as long as they explain how they do that. But many of them get really into it and realize that, I always wanted to write a song, but I never had an excuse to do it. Or I, wanted to do this clay project, but I never had a, reason to sort of justify doing that because I'm not a, 6-year-old anymore with the parents that are here's some clay. So I think, really how do we make education, the process of learning, joyful and social, and really leverage that inherent curiosity that everyone still has, even if it gets beaten out of them a little bit by the system. It's still there, and if you create an environment that is joyful and fun and not stressful, but still have requirements, then at least I've seen with my students that they really blossom in that environment, and it's really rewarding.
That really resonates with me with I teach a January term intensive course at St. Mary's College, and I did the first one on what I called the stories of the universe, which introduces the technosocial dilemma, the first story, the second story of evolution, the third story of the noosphere, and almost everything we do, because we're together for 2.5 hours every day of the week, because it's a 3.5 week full-length course. Almost everything we do is either reflective or in small group, collaborative, having fun trying to figure stuff out. And 2 of the absolute favorite activities of students are in teams having to act out deep time and compressed time, and drawing together the noosphere, and how they would put that in an image. And teaching that course has been wonderful for me. Kellen is here tonight. He was in the first offering of that class. I am afraid that we are out of time for our Q&A, but the good news is that we have about another 25 minutes in the room before we have to kick you out and start packing up. So this is where the reception continues. We invite you to interact with each other, to follow up on the questions that continue to linger in your minds or the insights that you've pulled from this conversation. Introduce yourself to our panelists if you haven't already done so, and begin some conversations. Before we do that, I want to just say a few final words, though. So I want to thank our panelists for their brilliance, their insight, their really collaborative spirit, and the human energy that they've brought to this tonight. I want to thank our sponsors, again, Benchmark, our catalytic sponsor, Shack 15, our innovating sponsor, and Newman Nexus for their support of this evening's event as well. It's been really invaluable and a sign of your visionary and noospheric thinking. We are looking to align with other noospheric and visionary organizations who see the value of what we do. I want to take this moment to call out our operations team who helped make this event happen. Again, Devin and Abe behind the cameras and manning all the tech tonight. They've flown in from out of state to make this happen and have worked really, really hard on this for a long time. To Sam, my right-hand woman again, you can also thank Sam for the beautiful bookmarks. To Nancy, our CFO, Nancy, and our manager of projects, Alyssa, who were staffing the welcome table tonight, and to Ellen Ellen and Sam were staffing the info table. To Alan, our filmmaker who's here tonight, thanks to all of you for your part in making this happen. I want to acknowledge Lisa Moore, our new chair of the Human Energy Board of Directors, my dear friend who's here with us tonight. Nancy is our CFO, and I also want to acknowledge Shireen Kassira, who's here tonight. Shireen is, Shireen left. Well, I'm going to acknowledge her anyway. She has a new puppy who can only be crated for 4.5 hours. These dog people, I don't quite get them, but I know. Shireen was here with us tonight. She's our founder, Ben Kassira's daughter, and representing the Kassira Family Foundation here tonight. I want to acknowledge the members of Human Energy's Advisory Board, David, who is recovering from jet lag, Terry, and Brian Swim, our cosmologist in the back row. The members of Human Energy's Next Generation Advisory Board, Sadie Stock, you want to give us a wave, Sadie, Kellen, Sam, and Soloriana, our newest member. And our partners, David and Pro-Social World, Greg and Socratic Sciences, Peter and Benchmark, which has been more than a financial sponsor, but a true collaborator and friend in this project, so thank you. And finally, I want to thank our invited guests in the room. Thank you for making this a priority, for engaging with us, and really being present in a human way. And thanks to our followers on the live stream. We're really, really pleased to have you with us. So I hope this has been a stimulating and energizing evening for you. But what next? We invite you to connect, to share, and to contribute. You can connect with us by joining our global network and our growing community. The QR code that's on your bookmark and that's on the screen right now takes you to links for our newsletter, our YouTube channel, our new Substack, our LinkedIn, all the things. It also has information about our satellite salon. Maybe you want to host a satellite salon in your own home or place of business in collaboration with Human Energy. We'd love to talk to you about that. Or maybe you feel inspired to give, to contribute. We're a small nonprofit, founded just 4 years ago, but already making a significant global impact. A gift from you tonight can help us make the future of the Human Energy Global Salon Series a reality. We are planning to host our next salon in either Belgium or Paris with our partners in Europe next spring. We're in conversation with partners in Morocco, with possibilities in Asia and in Latin America. So we are really going to be taking this around the world, and we need your support to do that. We actually have an anonymous $5,000 matching gift to the Global Salon Series on the table tonight. We're really grateful for that. And I understand that a $1,000 gift has already come in to help us match that. So thank you to those anonymous donors. If you feel compelled or inspired or just nudged even, just a little nudge, to make a gift of any size towards supporting this series, we would be incredibly grateful. And you can do so at the link up there. It's also on our link tree that is linked otherwise. Okay, so that's our call to action. What are those? I'm always told I need calls to action. Paper. All right, thank you. Thank you again. We're grateful for this time together. Thank you for your part in building collective wisdom and catalyzing the evolution of the noosphere. Take care, enjoy the remaining time till about 9:30. Drive safe or ride safe or ferry safe or fly safe home. Thanks so much.
Great job.